Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Grieco, here again with another episode of Deep Listens. Time for another one of our regularly scheduled video game book club games. And today we are going to be talking about Castlevania, Symphony of the Night.
Woot.
The Vania in the Metroidvania genre. And I am joined, as always, by Billy the Vampire Slayer Rothert.
Whew. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I'm excited, as always, to play a Castlevania game, but even more excited that this particular one is like the Mac Daddy of all Metroidvania-style games. So, at least in the Castlevania camp of the Metroidvania games. So, I'm pretty hyped.
We are also joined, as always, by gaming the literary doctor. You're not a literary doctor.
No, that dream died.
But that's fine. You're more red than most of us.
Thank
We're
you.
also joined by Pete, the Frankenstein murderer Busby.
I'll take that. Although, if you read Mary Shelley's version, Frankenstein, not that bad a guy. Well, no, Frankenstein's a dick. Frankenstein's monster, not that bad a guy. He had a tough go of things.
Yes. Frankenstein's monster, misunderstood. Frankenstein, asshole.
Huge tool.
Yeah. And we are
But
also
in honor.
joined.
Wait,
Oh,
no,
go
hey,
ahead. Nope.
go on. Hey.
Sorry.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
I'll never step on
We
you.
know what the people are here for. In honor of our Dracula podcast, I got a cool fact about vampire bats.
Oh.
So this is from an article, an old school article, I think from 1990. Yep, 1990, Scientific American. Gerald Wilkinson, called Food Sharing and Vampire Bats. So vampire bats, if they miss meals 2 nights in a row, they'll starve to death. That's all it takes, 2 days for a vampire bat to starve to death. So it helps sort of combat some of that high risk. They'll actually share food. So one vampire will eat, its blood and then regurgitate it up for its fellow vampire bats. How delightful.
Aw.
Yeah.
Look at them. Look at that teamwork of these
Just
vampire bats.
Sharing out.
Well, a related fact that I know, in honor of Manu Ginobili retiring, he once caught a bat out of midair with his bare fucking hands during a game. A bat got loose in I think they were playing in Mexico City, or it was San Antonio. One of the two. They were playing, and a bat got loose in the stadium, and they needed to stop the game because a bat was loose in the stadium, and Animal Control was having a hard time with it, and the bat came low, and Manu Ginobili just bare hands slapped it out of midair and then picked it up off the ground and handed it to Animal Control. He then needed several shots for rabies.
Yeah.
So that apparently was not a pleasant experience for him, but a less pleasant experience for the bat. And we are also joined for the first time by a long-time listener, first-time, long-time, Grandin the Granimal Atwood.
Woo! Right. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Welcome.
Listener since episode 1.
Yes,
actually, of our podcast
since episode 1. Yep.
First time, long time.
Actually, I think when Billy told me about it, I think when I started listening, I think you guys had just put out the Psychonauts podcast.
Yeah.
So,
back when we talked about good games like Psychonauts. Well, instead. Well, welcome to the Morning Zoo. First time, long time.
Well, thank you for having me.
And
I think Shadow of the Colossus just got re-released. We could do it again.
Again? How many re-releases?
It could be the game of 2018.
Just every year, it's just a new version of Shadow of the Colossus.
But look at the fur on this one. This year the fur is so much better. Well, we've got our game, which is Symphony of the Night, but we also take emails on this show. So I think it's appropriate to take an email because we got one. And reminder, if you want to get in touch with the show, you can do so at DeepListensPod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got comment sections and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. You can send an email, which is what this is. This email comes from a longtime friend of the show, Zombie Pie, and he writes in, like he always does. I wouldn't call it an email so much as a screed. I would imagine if this could have been written in paper, it would have been written on toilet paper in blood. But let me go ahead and read this. Dear Deep Listens Catpanions, During a podcast not too long ago, Pete surmised that Dig Dug takes place in the Galaga universe. And while this man is right, it's also far crazier than any of you could anticipate. Namco has a metaverse they lovingly call United Galaxy Space Force.
Space Force.
Ginga Rempo Uchu Gun, shortened to UGSF. This canon includes Dig Dug and Galaga, but it also includes Cyber Command, Star Tygon, Ridge Racer, Ace Combat 3, Mr. Driller, Thunder Scepter, and many other games.
You're telling me Thunder Scepter is a real game?
Yes. And it's in this universe. Now, I know what you're wondering. Why in the world would Namco embark?
Scepter?
Well, yes, but also, why in the world would Namco embark on this long day's journey into night? Well, remember all those times you could play Namco arcade games during the loading screens for Ridge Racer or Ace Combat? Yes. While you and I view that as a fun time waster, Namco viewed it as a financial anachronism that needed to be addressed ASAP. Hence, the UGSF timeline includes several games that just included Galaga iconography as fun little Easter eggs or unlockables. So here's my best ability at summarizing the storyline thus far. In 2040, during the events of Ace Combat 3, Electrosphere, a devastating war between two competing multinational corporations, General Resource and Neurocom, motivated the war to create a pan-world government on Earth, uniting all the countries in peace. In 2090, the UGSF becomes the primary receptacle of technology, which leads to the creation of the UGSF Special Attack Team, Cyber Commando. During the events of Cyber Commando, a rebel group tries to hijack the government's high-tech tanks. By 2100, the Photon Drive, a propulsion engine in development since 2050, enters its release stage. In 2189, the main character of Burning Force enlists in one of the UGSF's space exploration programs. By 2200, Earthians have entered Alpha Centauri thanks to the invention of the warp drive. Those who settle in non-solar planetary systems are called Galaxians. The United Government is dissolved and organized to form the United Galaxy. As with the United Government, the United Galaxy bases operations on Earth. Life is good until 2243, when the events of Galaxian 3 occur, and humans make contact with their first hostile alien race, later known as a live weapon, or more commonly referred to as UMs. Unknown intellectual mechanized species. To make matters worse, a second hostile alien group is contacted in 2279, and this is when Galaga takes place. The United Galaxy comes into contact with aliens, the ETI, or extraterrestrial intelligence, triggering the Galaxian Galaga Wars of 2279. These wars go poorly.
Do you know how much more backstory is there?
Billy, you get back here. Billy, get back here. He got up. I saw him get up. You get back here and you take your medicine.
Where are we in this screed?
We're near the end.
All right.
We're near the end. You take your
because it's already gibberish.
Well, I'm glad that I'm going to have to read this twice because he needs to know.
You're not reading this twice.
Billy, you sit. Billy, you get. Once he gets his headphone. Hey, Billy. You don't get up. When we're reading listener emails, you sit down and you listen with respect. Someone typed this up.
I
and
needed
sent
some
it
water.
into us.
I needed
you listen
some
with
water.
respect.
I...
We love our listeners. Deep Listens, that's the podcast. Right
Okay.
in. These wars go poorly for the human forces as the aliens they face have quicker and more nimble spacecraft. Luckily, there's a breakthrough during the second year of the Galaxian Galaga War. Early preparations against alien attacks made it possible for the UGSF to finish development of a new space fighter. The fighter is equipped with dual fighter mode technology to face the impending threat in place of the now-defunct Galaxzip. The war is won, but unfortunately, a third hostile alien is encountered in 2281, and they are the notorious Bosconians, an alien race that prefers to attack using massive megastructures. Additionally, by the 228s, the Galaga forces evolve into the Gapless race and enter Gapless and Galaga 88. Luckily, humanity wins and steals the Gapless hyperdrive, but The Bosconians return in Final Blaster, which is set in 2290. This war continues to 2298, which is when the Bounty Hounds takes place. In 2235, the UIMS are back and attack humanity during the events of Starblade. Humanity is victorious and discovers a means to control quasars. We now flash forward to 2382 during the events of Dig Dug. Attacks from the extraterrestrial lifeforms have ceased, and humanity has reached utopia. On one of the UGSF colonies, underground indigenous lifeforms decide to attack human colonists. Luckily, Taizo Hori comes to the rescue and solves a similar incident in 2383, a la Dig Dug 2. Then in 2399, Susumu Hori, son of Taizo Hori and Matsuyo Tobi, who holds the title of Mr. Driller, moves to action to solve the block overflow incident of 2399. I'm going to stop now, but be aware, we are only halfway done with Namco's timeline.
Oh my god.
This is all for Dig Dug.
Next week, I'll pick up at Star Tygon and complete the story for you. Don't threaten me, sir.
Grandin, I really appreciate you being on for our last podcast ever.
I guess there won't be a next week. Sorry. You had a chance.
I don't know if this is real or not, but it sounds suspiciously like that Ape Escape Final Fantasy 13 canon from a couple weeks ago.
Okay. We also have let me see. We had another comment. Yes, we do.
While you're picking that up, I just want to play some hot defense here, Ro. Just real quick. You guys give me a lot of shit for stepping away from something that I wasn't going to have a prepared response for. But
there's no way to respond.
No, listen. For those who have not recorded a podcast, maybe just out there in beloved listener land, it's an art form to know when you can step up and pee when you're live recording something. You got to know the subtle nuance of human interaction, like when to get water, when to pee, when to have a snack. It just it's a necessity.
And you chose poorly, sir.
I did the best thing, which was hear less of that story.
Well, you heard all of it.
I respect the amount of effort that went into it, but my life was made worse by knowing it.
Yes, and our second comment is a Final Fantasy XII one, so we will save that for the next Final Fantasy XII show. So, with that out of the way...
That was already my favorite comment of the two.
The one that we didn't read?
Yes.
Okay. Well, look forward to that next time. The continuing explanation of the Namco cinematic universe. And without further ado, let's discuss Castlevania Symphony of the Night.
Why are we?
Okay, Billy, set us up. What is Castlevania Symphony of the Night?
Finally, here we are. Castlevania Symphony of the Night is set in the same general universe as much of the other Castlevania series is. This game, the storyline...
Quick question. Where is it in the Namco universe? Is it...
Moving right along.
Is Dig Dug there?
Moving right along.
Is Dig Dug's son Richter Belmont?
No.
Is Dracula just a evolved form of the puka? Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm just so confused.
Ready?
Yep, I'm ready. Tell me about the vampires.
Can we go?
Tell me about the vampires.
Great. All right, so Castlevania Symphony of the Night takes place directly after the events of a game called Castlevania Rondo of Blood. And specifically, that game followed the chronicles of Richter Belmont, son of Trevor, or somehow descendant of Trevor Belmont, which is one of the OG Castlevania characters, and the Belmont family. Well, I didn't play Rondo of Blood, but just in general, I think Alucard, Symphony of the Night's protagonist shows up in some earlier games in the Castlevania series. And what's set here in this version of Castlevania is Dracula's castle gets sort of resummoned and reformed through some plot bullshit that just makes them make more Castlevania games every year. Great narrative tool to just release infinity number of games. Awesome.
So Castlevania, the castle is Castlevania.
Yes. but the castle itself is resurrected and reformed once every century. Well, it's resurrected here, and that somehow gains the attention of Alucard, who is the son of Dracula. Alucard approaches this castle and says, Dracula's castle has now reformed. Castlevania stands before me. Let's just go in and defeat the lord of this castle. In this case, he assumed that was going to be Dracula or some Dracula minion, and return this castle from whence it came, thus ending this century's cycle. We learn very early in the game, like one of the first or second boss encounters, that actually Richter Belmont is the lord of this castle, which means inevitably we're going to have to fight Richter to defeat this castle. Ooh, the plot thickens. This hasn't happened before. We haven't had to fight an alleged good guy to defeat Castlevania before. Something must be going wrong. So Alucard sets off into Castlevania, this sort of summoned castle, and is now investigating sort of why the castle's lord is a Belmont. And at some point we learn why, and we get into more and more narrative and story, but that's the general setup of this Castlevania game.
Yep. So
can I ask an important question before we get too deep in? Every time you guys hear Richter, do you just think Johnny Tsunami, or is that just me?
That's just you.
No, okay. I occasionally think about Johnny Tsunami.
Nice. Totally Richter, bro.
Yes. So just a little bit of added depth. Alucard was originally in Castlevania 3. He was one of the playable characters in Castlevania 3. He was friends with Trevor Belmont. So that is the canonical. So Trevor actually shows up in this game in spots. So that for the Castlevania person who has followed this game for a long time, that this game has a lot of nice callbacks and stuff like that. So first question I want to ask Grandin, as the guest on this show, this was a game that you really chose for us. Why'd you pick this game? Like, what sort of relationship do you have with it?
So I think like Billy touched on earlier, it is the Vania and Metroidvania. It's widely considered as objectively one of the greatest games of all time. And you guys have hit on some Metroidvanias before. Y'all played Ori, which is also a game I love. And you played
Game of the Year, Vault of Story, Abyssal City.
Game of the Year, Vault of Story, Abyssal City was a Metroidvania. So I thought,
yes, it was.
Go back to the original. Also, Castlevania Symphony of the Night was really my kind of foray into video games. I got a PS1 when I was in high school, and got it from a friend of mine. And Castlevania was just sort of in the games that I got with it, and ended up 100%ed it a couple times. I beat it with a bonus character with Richter, and I just love Metroidvanias. So,
but have you 200%ed it?
200.6%.
I have once, and I tried doing it on, because I downloaded it for Xbox, and I don't know if it's a bug or a glitch or something, but I can't. I'm at like 199.7, and there's one tiny little thing. I don't know if it's an Xbox bug or what, but yeah. So I haven't tried it since then.
Well, cool. So this is a game that I first came to when it was re-released on the Xbox 360, and it kind of blew my mind back then, and then going back and playing it again for the podcast, I fell in love with it a second time. This game is freaking brilliant.
Yeah, it's so good.
When did you... So, Billy, is this the first time you've ever played this game?
This is my first ever time playing Symphony of the Night. I've played other Castlevania games. The Castlevania game that I played... first was, I believe, Circle of the Moon, which is the one where you have like a card system as your ability and spell slot.
Okay. And Pete, what about you?
This is my first ever Castlevania game. It was just never like a series I really got into. So I think if I had to play one, this is the one to pick.
Nailed it.
Yeah. I've never played another Castlevania game. This is the only one.
Same.
Actually, Billy, question for you: Did you 200.6% this game?
I did.
You did.
Of course you did.
0.6.
You did.
Well, so here's the thing. I will say, I played this game on an emulator
Okay.
And I didn't have the download app to make the emulator think that I had a memory card in, so I had to use save states to save my game. And I can't know for certain if the game says I got 206% because you can only check by going to your load screen and seeing the game progress.
Right.
But I looked up online what makes a game a 200.6% completion game, and I am able to verify all those things. I checked off all the boxes. I've got.
He's just running down.
I've got 1,890 rooms. Got all the artifacts. I checked off all the boxes, so there should be no reason why.
1,890 boxes.
Well, there's more than that because you have to also get all the artifacts and some other things. But
Question.
I don't have any reason to think why I would not have 200.6% of this game.
Okay, so I will go into where the 0.6 comes from. I will ask that question at some point, but not now. For now, let's discuss some of the basics. So, Alucard, you're entering the castle. When we say Castlevania, it is a 2D side-scrolling game where you have this kind of map that you're gradually fleshing out as you jump through each of these different rooms. It kind of fills in the map. You'll kind of go through different sections of the castle, gain access to an item or an ability, which will unlock further parts of the castle for you to explore. Eventually, you will have all of the objects you need, but there is a healthy amount of doubling back to find secret items. There are secret walls that you can attack, and they will open up hidden areas. There's a whole lot of just hidden optional content in this game that makes it one of the more fun games to explore and re-explore. So, did you guys come across any of those secrets organically, or did you use guides and stuff?
So many guides.
I came across many of these secrets organically, and I only really used guides to get 200.6%.
Okay. Yeah,
I probably came across the biggest secret organically, so I can't wait to talk about that.
Yeah, same. I came across most of this stuff organically. The only thing I needed a guide for was at one point there was an accessory or an artifact that I thought I should have found already, and I think I just walked past the room by accident, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't just completely off base. Brandon, how did you... Oh, go ahead, Pete.
No, Brandon can go first.
I was just going to say, most of it was also organic for me. But I just think that kind of speaks to the brilliance of its game design. Like when you're able to come across most of those, even secret areas, you find them. You can pretty much find them on your own. I did use a guide eventually. I think I got online for a couple things, but the sword familiar I had to get online for. But I don't remember anything else.
Yeah, I think it's really great design how many different levels kind of have walls that make sense to be hidden walls. Like
Right.
There are plenty of areas where if you just attack a wall, it looks like a normal wall, and then it starts to crumble. And if you hit it once or twice, it opens up, and then you'll get a secret room or an object of some kind. And in the very first hallway, really, you'll eventually run into a wall with stones. And if you just attack that wall, it'll drop a pot roast, which wall meat is a recurring theme of the Castlevania series. But very early on, it provides you with an opportunity to learn that. And it just continues over and over and over again.
Yeah.
A lot of the times in this game, if something looks suspicious or looks interactable, it is. And that's super awesome. And this game just has a ton of systems. Like, there's the familiars, which, granted, you just mentioned. Do you want to talk about what those are?
There are 5. They're basically just characters that'll follow you around and help you out. There's a demon, he'll flip switches and attack enemies for you. There's a fairy, and she'll heal you. There's a ghost, he'll attack enemies. Bats will attack enemies, and the sword will also attack enemies. So just things that'll kind of help you out.
And they level up.
They do level up, yeah. Mm-hmm.
They gain
They usually
experience.
have specific effects when they get to level 20 or level 50 or something.
Yeah.
There's specific breakpoints at their levels, and usually 50 is their ultimate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you guys use?
Sword.
Imp.
Fairy.
Fairy. Yeah, fairy.
I like
Fairy's
Claire.
useful. Just
Well, they
healing
use
you.
that life apple, so it's kind of a even
They
if,
can also use the
not that
hammers
it's
to deal
hard,
with
not that
that.
it's I don't die very often in this game, but it's nice to have that kind of space in the hole.
Yeah,
I like Survive too.
Yeah, she's cool. She talks.
Yeah, she's nice.
The imp
if you idle around, if you just stand there and do nothing, the fairy will go and sit on your shoulders.
Oh,
so
she'll just like kick back, relax. Yeah, if you're just sacking around, you just. But then if you move, he's like, ah, because you like throw her off. She falls down because you moved.
Freaking Alucard.
There's also a like Street Fighter-esque special move system in this game that you can discover the moves organically by just putting in inputs, but you can also unlock them at the library by buying basically the descriptions of the moves. Did you guys like learn about these special moves organically, or was that something that you just ran into the library and then learned about?
Are you talking about the spells, or are you talking about the special moves?
I found
kind of both. There's the spells, which are very explicit. Those are the same every time. And then there are also special moves for some of your different weapons that are game-breaking as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of them are like
all the sword ones I found basically organically.
Yeah. Most are like joystick rotations, so it's easier to sort of just stumble into it.
I found 2 of them organically. I found Dark Metamorphosis organically, and I found Hellfire organically.
Okay.
I found Dark Metamorphosis first by accident, and then through playing around, I found Hellfire after that.
Right, yeah.
Those are the ones that were the easiest to accidentally find, because the other ones involved mostly like charge moves or more complicated input sequences. But anyone who's played a Street Fighter game can do like a half circle or a fireball motion, and just messing around with those, you find a couple.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that they would even put this in. Like, the idea of having specific inputs to have special moves is something that Metroidvania games don't necessarily, or at least up until this time, didn't really mess around with. It was a combination of genre that I think was well ahead of its time. And
that's not 100% true, because shine sparking and other parts of true Metroid games are weird commands that sometimes you're not really told about in the game, and that happened before this game.
Yeah, but shine sparking is not an entire like special move system. Like, that's one thing.
You're right. It's not a whole system like this is. I will concede that.
Like, it's in this game, like, you're summoning spirits, you're doing teleports, and then shooting fireballs. You're getting additional properties to your attacks. Special items sometimes, like, will have different moves if you do like back forward and then an attack. It's also interesting that this game doesn't have like up does not jump you, because they had to use the up direction for inputs. So there's a jump button instead. It's something subtle, but once you pick up on that fact, all of a sudden, like for a while I was not pressing up because I assumed it would make me jump. But when you realize that you need to press up and an attack button to use your item, like item is not a button unto itself. And in Castlevania games, you know, you have this secondary slot that will take up hearts. And in this game, unlike others, it's not a button to do that. It's it's an up command. It's a modifier. So this game's got a lot of like subsystems for special moves.
It does.
Are not obvious early on, and it adds a lot of added depth. Now, you don't necessarily need all of that to clear the game, but it's there if you want to come find it. Speaking of other hidden depth, or not necessarily hidden, but depth, you have multiple forms as well. You get different creatures that Alucard can transform into. A wolf, mist, and a bat. What is funny?
Just the fact that you can turn into mist. Like,
that's actually kind of like vampire canon.
Yeah, it is. It's vampire. Well, it's not in Bram Stoker's original, I don't think. But like, where were your like wolf and bat? I get. Like, because there are at least organ systems involved there. Like, how does one survive as mist?
Well, you don't get attacked, so it's very easy to survive as mist.
True. You can poison people, too.
You can poison people. You're invincible. Yeah, there's a lot of advantages.
Wizards of the Coast vampires become mist.
They do.
Both in MTG and D&D.
Yeah, so what other system? There's the equipment system. Like, how many of the different items did you guys find to be significantly different or really altered your style of play?
Should we get to breaking yet?
We'll not say breaking, but let's just throw out
one.
some ones that are really different, that are like oddball items. There's one that I thought that was neat. It was called like the jewel sword or the gem sword or something, and it just gave a really high chance of when you struck down an enemy, like item that you could sell would appear, like a money generating item that's based off your luck, I think.
Yeah, and you have stats, right? That too.
You have stats.
Yeah.
My favorite weapons loadout. It's very much not the best one in the game, but my favorite is the Alucard with T.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can find he has these heirloom weapons, the Alucard loadout, and they're really good. But you can get this other one that's like, oh, it's almost the same thing, but it sucks and it just increases your luck. Yeah, it's a cheap knockoff. But I just loved using that one so much.
Yeah, it's your base loadout that you start the game with. The game gives you all of these good weapons early on, and then they strip it from you almost immediately, and it's great. It's like, oh, finally, I got my good stuff back. Here's where my what? This tag says made in China. I don't.
Yeah,
this isn't a
it
priceless
makes you
heirloom.
super lucky.
Yes,
it is useful in that it makes farming the game breaking stuff way easier.
Yeah, truth.
Yeah, I really like
that's
Basilard.
that's what I used it for, but that's literally the only time I would use it.
What weapon do you prefer that is not game breaking, Brandon? Or like early stuff that you found?
Early, I liked. I think it was called the Basilard. It was the really short sword that you could just. I mean, it was just rapid fire, and that I liked a lot.
The Basilard was good, and then the combat knife was the upgraded version of it.
Yep. Yeah, that one was good too.
The
I like the jewel
fist
knuckles,
is good too.
just because they just. I mean, I would love a pair of jewel knuckles. Just seems like an inherently badass thing to have.
The one that I used a lot before I broke the game was, I think it was called the Holy Rod. Might be missing that. It just had one of the faster attack animations before you get the best weapons in the game, and Holy dealt really good damage against most things in the game.
Yeah, pretty much everything.
And it dealt kind of like an AoE attack that was. It kind of did like a little more. It didn't have max range like some of the sword weapons do, but
it was pretty good though.
It was pretty solid.
Yeah, I loved that
actually. So the first time I played through, I actually completed it at only 100%. Like I killed Richter,
yeah.
And I used the Holy Rod to do it. I didn't realize there was more to the game until my second playthrough. Like, oh hey. I only finished half this game. But yeah, I use the Holy Rod for that.
Yeah, there's a lot of awesome items, and you have 2 slots, so you can use unless you're using a 2-handed weapon, you can use a weapon in one slot, and then a shield or a second weapon in the other. So you can kind of have a loadout, which is nice. Like, I had the Basilard for when I needed to kill a boss, I would get up next to it and then just stab it in its face, just stab the shit out of it. And just by mashing the button, I could generally kill the boss before it could attack me back. But then you kind of want a short sword for dealing with general enemies, or something with a little bit more range for dealing with other enemies, because you don't want to have to get up close to every enemy. There's some enemies that are really rough when you want to get it close to them. And the Basilard, some weapons don't attack at certain angles. Like, you don't have a diagonal slash if you're using the Basilard. You do if you have a short sword. There are some weapons that you get these special moves like back forward, and if you press back then forward, you'll do an extra special attack or something. Some have moves that if you press 2 buttons at the same time does something different. So it allows for all these different ranges of playstyle, and you don't necessarily need all of them to beat this game, but I love that it's there. Like, it's depth that detracts nothing, because there are so many correct ways to play. And so many games mess that up, I feel.
I will say I never found a relevant 2-hand weapon. I think the 2-handed weapons didn't have a big enough upside to warrant not being able to have a second weapon in your loadout. They generally only did like kind of the same damage as a one-handed weapon did.
Yeah, they tended to be like slightly stronger.
Did they have cool like special moves that I wasn't finding?
I'm thinking like late game there was like like the Masamune, like the katana.
Oh yeah, that one's
that one's really
that's like
good.
the max damage.
Like super late game.
I think it's the max base damage sword.
Yeah.
Yeah. Besides sword familiar, yeah.
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 A lot of those items, even if they're not better, they might be slightly better in terms of just like single hit than having a weapon in each hand, but the versatility of having one in each hand is generally better. But there's nothing that will stop you necessarily from advancing if you go with the two-handed option over the one-in-one.
Yes.
Which, just because something's inefficient, in this game, inefficiency is not punished with death in the way that it is sometimes in other games. There are times when in other games, if you use this loadout, it means you have to play for an extra 10 hours to grind your way to overcome the fact that you're, playing with one hand behind your back. In this game, it might mean that you have to actually fight the boss instead of cheesing it or something like that. Yeah. But you can still advance. Like, they give you enough healing items. They give you the familiars. They give you special moves that heal you. They give you so many options to approach every encounter that you really, as long as you have some grasp of some of them, you don't even need all of them, like all of these different systems. If you have some grasp of them, you will make progress. I think that's really a testament to this game's strength. One thing I wanted to discuss about this game was its camp factor, because this might be one of the campiest games we've ever played. Let's start with
you can pick the cloak, like their cloaks, whose only special ability is, you get to pick what color you want it to be.
Yeah, Joseph's Technicolor
cloak.
Dream.
Actually, that's a really good cloak until late in the game.
Yeah,
it's the Technicolor Dream.
It's got
cloak.
the highest, it's got like the highest stats until very late in the game.
It makes you look fly as hell.
Oh man, I had a hot purple and green loadout, fucking Green Goblin looking thing. It was sexy.
Yeah, but
the bat turns the same colors too.
They tell you, like, it's it's the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Like, that's in this game. There's an item. So, the camp works on two levels. There's the story, and then there's how the game's items and equipment and stuff like that play into that camp. Like, the story is over the top. The voice acting is incredible. Objectively great. Everyone knows it. It's like they hired voice actors from the local dinner theater and told them that they were too subtle.
Like, this was their big chance. They're like, I can't leave anything on the bench. Leave it all on the field. They just gave 110%.
I am Dracula.
What is a man?
Yeah, it's like weirdly fast and aggressive, too.
Well, I think a lot of times when they were loading their text, like the disc would have to kind of like wait a second and like fetch the file, like the audio file. So some of their dialogue was chopped up in funny, like, tempo.
Yeah, it's so great. Like, the very first conversation at the beginning of the game starts with Richter confronting Dracula. Richter Belmont says, "Die, monster, you don't belong in this world." Dracula, this is written, I'm not the voice actor here. I know I sound very similar, but I'm not them. It is not by my hand that I am once again given flesh. I was brought here by humans who wish to pay me tribute. Richter. Tribute? You steal men's souls and make them your slaves.
Let me interrupt just at this point. If I remember the next line correctly, Dracula's next line might be the best one in the whole game.
Perhaps the same could be said of all religions.
I'm remembering it correctly.
Richter, your words are as empty as your soul. Mankind ill needs a savior such as you. To which Dracula replies, Grandin.
What is a man?
Yep.
Is it a miserable little pile of secrets?
But enough talk.
That's actually pretty close, honestly.
But enough talk. Have at you. That's the
first.
first.
And he throws the cup too.
He said, "What is a man?" And then he
fucking
tosses
smacks his cup off of his.
Yeah.
This game is incredible. Like,
what a heavy start! Like for the game too. Like, just gonna smash down all the world's religions, like in 3 lines of dialogue.
Yeah, and the game starts by telling you that Castlevania, after 100 years, has risen again, brought by the Dark Lord, the Dark Priest Shaft, who is trying to raise Dracula. This game is basic. It is one of the campiest things I've ever played, just on its face. Everything is high drama. Everything is so earnest. It feels like a production, of literally like a dinner theater or like a local playhouse they're going to put on. And they all, look, they're working 9 to 5s, and this is what they have. This is what they've got going on. And they're going to put on the best damn little house of horrors that they can. Little shop of horrors that their limited budget can. And then it applies also to the gameplay, because you've got all these items like the sunglasses, one of the first items that you get. What do the sunglasses do?
Sunglasses.
It makes you look cool.
It makes you look cool. It ups your...
It
decreases
drops your intelligence.
Yeah.
Yes.
What does it increase? Luck?
Nothing.
It increases... No, it increases something. There was a trait. I think it made your like attack up 1 or something like that. It was like +1 attack or something. But it made your... No, it was +1 defense. It made your intelligence go down.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought it gave you nothing but only decreased your intelligence, which also
does it show up on the
whatever
sprite?
it gives you is negligible. Like it's basically nothing.
Yes. It does not show up on the sprite, but there are items like there was something called like secret boots or something that
make you a little bit taller.
Makes the sprite slightly taller.
Yes. You can wear pumps to make yourself slightly taller. There's the Technicolor Dreamcoat. There are swords like there's a sword called Graham, and then if you look at the item description, it says like the sword named Graham.
Yeah.
In one of the levels, all of the enemies are different characters from the Wizard of Oz. Like in the inverted library, there's the lion, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow.
Yeah.
And the shmoo. I don't know what the shmoo is, but
It's like a floating head.
It's a floating head, but I don't think it's from the Wizard of Oz. I don't know. Maybe I missed that part.
No, I don't think so.
But it just draws inspiration from all these different spots, and it all blends together in this really interesting way, I think. It adds so much to this game. And I'm someone who takes game stories pretty seriously, and I prefer games to be serious for the most part. But this game, it's trying to be serious. What it's saying is just ludicrous.
I think it's trying harder than any game I think I've played personally. I don't know about you guys. It is trying so hard.
I'm trying to think of a
only game I've ever played that yells "What is a man?" at me.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of another game that overacts this much.
Yeah, but
Bayonetta.
Yeah,
kinda.
But Bayonetta winks.
That's true.
Bayonetta knows that Bayonetta's crazy. This game doesn't seem to know it, and it's the sort of thing that games just are it's so hard to pull off, because there's a lot of games that try this, that want to be campy. And they usually miss the mark because it just comes off as poorly made. This game manages, every single thing that it has added to this, to the game to make it feel campy, works. The production values of this game are actually very high. The execution on everything is very high. And so when you have throwaway items or, little things that are hard to discern or lines that are read really poorly, it's in the service of a game that is so much greater than the sum of its parts, and there are a lot of good parts. So I think it's much more excusable than a game that tries to get by on charm, but, in trading on charm, it turns out there's not much else. And I think that that's what makes this game succeed so well. Can we talk about one of the cooler, campier moments in this game? The 100% to 200% moment? The moment when you realize that there's a back half to this game?
Yeah.
It's equal parts really dumb, that you can 200% the game, and genius. Because like the biggest twist in the whole game would be completely revealed if you got to the end and you're like, why am I only like 50% done? I've seen every room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, you get through all these different rooms, and the music in this game is incredible. There's a whole bunch of areas to explore. You get so many different abilities, and it feels like you're heading towards a Metroid-style end. Like, you've got all the abilities. And you basically run into... You can just go straight to the room where you fight Dracula, and Richter Belmont will be there, and you can kill him, and the game will be over. However, if you keep getting additional abilities, like you find the basement and you get spike armor, you get bat form, you get mist form, you get the ability to stay in mist form longer. If you get some of these additional abilities, which you don't actually need to get to the final room, all you need is bat mode to get to the fight with Richter. If you get all of those abilities, then you can meet Maria Renard, who's this character who you run into here and there. And she will eventually, at the center of the castle, you need to get these two, is it watches or pendants? Rings?
It's silver ring and gold ring.
Yeah, you need 2 rings.
You get these 2 rings, and Maria will give you even sweeter sunglasses that let you see through evil illusions. And this will fundamentally change the fight with Richter. Does someone want to explain the twist?
Grandin.
Grandin, you're the guest.
Okay, so if you put the holy glasses, I think they're called, on.
Yeah.
During the fight with Richter, you see like that he's being controlled by some kind of floating thing above him. So if you attack that and kill that, that is Shaft or whatever the Dark Priest was.
Yeah.
And so
it's Samuel L. Jackson. It's Shaft.
Right. Yes. So Richter's released, I guess, from his spell, and Shaft summons an inverted castle. So it is the castle that you were just in, turned upside down, and then you can go into that and just basically do it all over again. But with different enemies. But yeah, it's pretty incredible. Like the first time, like seeing it, because I came into the game like knowing nothing about it. So yeah, the first time seeing that just blew my mind. Like,
yeah, and
it's pretty great.
From a development perspective, as someone who dabbles in game design, designing every room in your game to function right side up and upside down is insane. Like, the game, there's some abilities that they need to give you to make it work, like bat form allowing you to move fully in, all directions, allows a lot of leniency. Things that would be taken care of by gravity can be undone if you can fly. But a lot of the levels work both ways. They give you things that seem kind of trivial in the moment, like you get a high jump that makes your jump slightly higher and you get a double jump. But the high jump doesn't really seem to, be all that meaningful because you get bat form. And once you
get a
can
super
fly,
jump too.
Yeah, you get a super jump too, but once you can fly and once you can do those additional things, it doesn't seem like you would need a super jump. Like, you can get around without those abilities. But once they invert the castle, it becomes a hassle if you're going to move in slow bat form all the time. So they give you all of these little upgrades that otherwise aren't that useful, that in the inverted castle make getting around much, much, much easier. And it's kind of a tour de force. Like, some levels just become a lot more interesting to navigate upside down. Like, some levels I think are better upside down than they are right side up.
Some levels are different entirely. It's not perfect. It's not perfect exact same rooms because there's some, like, for example, in the inverted castle, you get a real big introduction to, like, traps and hazards where you otherwise wouldn't have in the regular version of the castle. So there's things that are actually added. It's not like the rooms are exactly perfectly just upside down, but they are. And then there's also some more stuff added in the inverted castle.
Yeah, and some stuff like there's some rooms where on the ceiling there were spikes. And I was like, well, I can't jump that high. What's the point of having spikes on the ceiling in this room? I'm never going to touch them. Like, I'm never going to fly into them intentionally as a bat. There's nothing. And then
little did you know.
Little did I know. Like a goober, I assumed there was no reason for that. And then, inverted castle. Turns out it's an obstacle. There's some stuff that relies on gravity that doesn't work when you're in inverted castle mode. And then there's water, which is awesome in the inverted castle. Like, water's still there, and water still has the same properties, but it is still flowing the way it would if the castle was right side up.
It falls up.
It falls up. So if you jump into it, like, you have normal physics until you hit the water, and then you have floaty physics for, like, the back half of your jump, which is crazy. Like, there's a waterfall that in the early part of the game, you just walk under it, and then when you're trying to get under the waterfall in the inverted castle, it's actually a jump puzzle, because you can't just bat your way through the waterfall or, like, mist your way through the waterfall.
You can just dog.
You can dog your way into the waterfall.
Dog can just swim.
Wait, the wolf can swim?
Yeah, dog just swims.
You have to get it like an ability, but yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't get wolf swimming. I'm sorry.
That's how you have to 206% part of the game.
Okay, so that's how you get to the top of the water.
That's how you get to the top of the water in the upside down invert. I mean, there's other ways you can do it without the dog swim. I think you can. Like, jump at just the right place that, like, Alucard's head, like, touches a little bit of it, and you can activate that square. But I think the intended way is to get dog swim, and then you just doggy paddle in the water.
I was kind of secretly hoping that was the secret power of the hidden boots. Getting that 1 pixel of height was just what you needed to push your head into the area. I've never used dog swim. Wow. There's probably some abilities that I've just never seen because I've never needed them. What was your favorite subsection of the castle, inverted and regular?
Honestly, the Marble Gallery. That first section, I just thought was incredible. Just the music and everything. I mean, it was just so well done.
Where's that big staircase where, like, you kill things and they roll spikes at you?
Yeah, the chapel.
I like the chapel. I don't like the rest of the chapel. I just love that staircase so much.
Yeah.
I liked. I have to think about this. I think my favorite part of the. I think it was Inverted Castle, like the Colosseum area. Yeah. That part was really cool for me. I like that one a lot. I liked the music in that stage, like the Colosseum music. I think worst ones probably was hands down that clock tower area where there was like the gears.
Yeah,
that was just trash. That was ugh.
The clock tower is full of harpies and Medusa heads that turn you to stone.
It's just very tall and narrow, and if you get tapped by one enemy, you just get knocked all the way back down. That's just frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the section of the game where I was very happy that I had mist form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's also something kind of incredible about the design. Like, they give you mist form, which just lets you navigate without worrying about enemies.
You just mist through them.
Yeah.
At a certain point in the game, it's just... This game is so set up for speedrunning, it's not even funny. It's awesome.
Do we know what, like, the record is? Like, how fast could you get through?
I'll look it up.
I looked it up. Billy. So, I think it's time to discuss breaking this game. Did everyone feel like at some point this game was broken?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What was your tool?
Hold on, real quick. The world record speed run, 16 minutes, 44 seconds, 433 milliseconds.
That's for beating Richter?
I don't know.
Okay.
It says any percent.
Okay, that's probably beating Richter.
All bosses, which would include Inverted Castle, would be 31 minutes, 35 seconds.
Yeah, I mean,
glitchless, any percent, 33 minutes. That'd probably just be Richter with no glitches.
Yeah.
Wow. So, what was your tool for breaking the Symphony of the Night?
I've already forgotten the names because they're mostly so silly. What's the upgraded version of the Vorpal Blade called?
The
Snickersnack.
The Crisagrum?
The Crisagrum, yeah.
Yeah, if you get 2 of those,
The
you
win
can
button.
you can just walk forward and just things explode in front of you.
Yeah.
What is that?
The Crissaegrim.
So with the Vorpal blade, you can walk and like swing at the same time, but you get one shot. With the Crusadum, you get 4 shots, basically all at once. So you just hit it and just walk forward, and enemies die at your feet.
And each one of them does there are like 4 or 5 blades that come out. Each one of them does like a stupid high amount of damage.
There's 4.
And there's no cooldown. You just keep pressing.
There's no cooldown. If you just have one of them, you can do 16 attacks per second. And if you have 2 of them, you can do, I think, like 24 or 30 attacks per second.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Where do you get this? I didn't find this
You
weapon.
have to farm this.
You know that Shmoo you were talking about?
That fucking guy?
Shmoo drops
that fucking guy. Yeah, he drops that.
There is a 1 in 588 chance of the Shmoo dropping.
That's why you got to get that a la carte, that knockoff a la carte shit.
Gotta get lucky, dog.
But isn't there also an item that, like a ring, that also increases the likelihood of rare drops?
Yeah.
The Lapis Lapidaris?
The Lapis Lupus or whatever it's called, yeah.
Yeah.
There's also a mode that does it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pete's mode. Luck mode.
My bad.
What? Okay, so for me it was the shield rod.
Shield rod and shield. Yeah,
so,
and Alucard shield.
Lazuli. That's the ring.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the shield rod is a weapon you can get in the Colosseum, and with early shields, like if you press the attack button for both the shield rod and the shield you have equipped at the same time, you'll get a spell. Depending on what shield you have equipped, it's a different spell. Like the Alucard, if you use the leather shield, like you do a cow spell, and it increases your defense by 20. If you use a knight shield, it increases your attack by 20. I think if you use the Alucard shield, it's like luck up. Some of them reduce different elemental damages, but when you get the Alucard shield, it does a super spell that makes it so that having the Alucard shield out prevents all damage from the front and deals about 200 damage per second to anything in contact with you and heals you 8 health for every instance of damage you do.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty solid.
Yeah.
It costs a little bit of magic for every every hit, but it's a very little amount of magic, so you will almost never run out. So I basically just would invoke that spell and then, lower my shoulder into an entire room of enemies, and they would all die before I passed through them. So it's probably a similar experience to your walk forward and make everything die, but mine healed me slightly, and they died slightly slower.
Alternatively, you could never take damage ever using Crissaegrim, and healing becomes irrelevant.
Well, I didn't take much damage either, but if I did, due to some unforeseen circumstance, I could heal it. But at that point, it doesn't matter. Like, there's a lot of weapons that will have a very similar effect. You can walk forward and just jam on the combat knife, and that will kill a lot of things.
Yeah.
You can use Soul Steel, and it will just destroy everything in a room if your intelligence is high enough. You can just let your familiars go to town if it's like the Sword Familiar, and it will kill everything.
Familiars are indestructible. You just leave them there. It'll take a while, but they will clear that whole room for you.
They'll do it.
They'll kill every boss if you let them. I mean, you can turn to poison mist, and just snuff people out that way.
My game break was the backspace button.
What does the backspace button do?
So on an emulator.
Oh,
come on.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm going to say 2 game breaks, because this one's kind of bullshit, and the other one's actually in the game. So I had to play on an emulator. I didn't have a choice. The emulator can run the game at like higher speed. So my game break was to use save states and use the backspace button to go fast. I would use all my spells and magic and run out of magic, and then I just go to a safe spot in the room and just hold backspace for a few seconds and slowly refill all of my magic again. Which isn't necessarily I wouldn't call that cheating, because
I would.
if I wanted to, I could have just got up and left and done like some chores around the house for like 5 minutes, and I would have also regained that health or that magic. I just didn't do the chores, and I got all the magic back instead. So anyway, that's game breaking.
You didn't eat your meat, and
but
you had to have pudding.
But ultimately, weapons are irrelevant in this game because Soul Steel.
Yeah, Soul Steel's great. It just does a bunch of damage.
I maxed intelligence. I went all spell damage, and one spell can kill just about the hardest enemy in the game. I mean, most bosses, I just walked in, cast 2 spells, and the fight was over.
That's what happens when you're Dracula's son. You start doing stuff like that.
And I will say, once I got Crissaegrim, I went back to weapons, but then I changed my loadout to just be entirely glass cannon because it didn't fucking matter anymore. I used that item that's called like Mars Strength or whatever, and it makes your attack go up by 24, and then your
strength of 24 men.
Yeah, and then your defense goes down by 24. But I was never going to get hit, so it doesn't matter.
I love that the picture for that ring is a ring with the number 24 on top of it.
Yeah. Did you guys ever get the...
I wish I could have proposed using that ring.
Did you guys ever get the holy symbol?
Wait, go ahead,
The
Pete.
holy symbol?
Did you guys ever get... I think it's called the holy symbol.
Lets you breathe underwater.
Lets you breathe underwater? Do you know what it is?
Yeah.
It's a snorkel.
Yeah, it's a snorkel.
It's actually a snorkel.
Yeah.
What were you saying, Pete?
I was just saying that I love how, based on that logic, each unit of strength is equal to a single person. So if you get to 100 strength, you're the strength of 100 men, I guess. So does that mean your luck and intelligence scales the same way? I have the luck of 200 men.
I dare you try and hit me. Play any sort of rocks, paper, scissors with me. I dare you. I do kind of imagine that because you're Dracula's son, and the campiness also, Alucard is just Dracula backwards.
He's the Ekans of the Castlevania series.
Exactly.
Wow.
He is the Arbok. I just wish that this game was about each of the members of this castle just throwing the fight with Alucard. It's the boss's kid.
Like the librarian does. I couldn't possibly help you against the Count. And he's like, I'll pay you. And he's like, all right, I guess it's fine.
It's like, oh, Alucard, you're so strong. Here, take this spider ring. It's got magical powers.
It's just some shit they pulled out of a quarter machine somewhere.
Here are these special boots. They'll give you a lot of power, Alucard. And then just the skeletons are falling down and then getting back up when he's leaving. He's like, that fucking guy.
Jesus, what a tool.
He's probably going, I think these are just pumps. No, they're secret boots.
You're slightly taller now.
Look at how cool you look in those sunglasses, Alucard. So cool.
I want to, at some point, transition to how the game... So we've already talked about how the game breaks, right?
Yeah.
Yes. We've done
This
that.
actually made me have not a fun time.
Boo.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
which is weird because...
I'll allow it.
Because normally, I get off on breaking games. I get off on drop charts. I get off on 200%.
You sack around.
I'm on brand with Grindfather aesthetic, but I didn't enjoy how quickly this game got broken because all I had left to experience was the narrative, and that kind of wasn't that great.
And what a narrative it was.
This game wasn't made famous because of its story.
What is a man, Billy?
It had a couple of twists that were cool, but the writing in this game was all I really got to experience.
Look, Billy, perhaps let me read you. You probably are just not remembering the game that well. You're probably not remembering all of the great story and dialogue. So let me just read you some choice ones. Here we go. Alucard. You have been doomed ever since you lost the ability to love.
Yes.
Dracula. Ha! Ah, sarcasm. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the world and loses his own soul? Matthew 19:26, I believe.
Yep, it is. Wait, does he actually say Matthew 19:26?
Yes.
I believe
He quotes the scripture.
Phenomenal.
All right,
Yep.
so yeah, there are some real club bangers in the quotes of this game. But what I'm saying here is, it didn't take very long for all of the combat to become trivial, all of the castle exploration to become trivial. And I'm gonna go into some detail here. Right? Once I got access to the spells, which was about 10% into the game, and I don't mean 20 out of 200.6, I mean 10 out of 200.6. Like, I was very early in the game when I accidentally found Dark Metamorphosis. And when I got that, it meant that I could heal off killing enemies, and that was huge. So a huge part of the early game just didn't matter anymore. I didn't have to ration my health. It would have been a really, really cool thing to experience, a Metroidvania game where you don't heal very often. That would have been really cool, but I just accidentally found the heal button. I mean, this game has items like potions and food that you don't get very often, and it makes you really have to make some meaningful choices about when and where you're going to use your items. And if you go through a section of the game poorly, like if you stumble and fuck up some rooms, it feels like a Dark Souls game. You just die and have to kind of restart and go through that series again until you get better at going through that level and can get through it without taking any damage, a la a Dark Souls game. That never happened for me because I found the spell that lets me heal off of most enemy kills. Granted, not every single enemy. Basically, if it bleeds, you're allowed to heal off of it. Not every enemy bleeds when you kill it.
If it bleeds, you can kill it, though.
Right, but some enemies are just like skeletons and they just fall apart like skelly bones and they fall down and you don't heal off those guys. But a lot of enemies you can just heal off of them, and that took away a lot of the challenge of the first quarter of the whole game. Then when I messed around and got other spells, I just didn't have to fight ever again. I would walk into a room, I'd use Soul Steel or something else, but Anna, so I'd go to a couple of rooms, blow everything up.
Say that again, Billy.
And
you cut out for a second.
Sorry, I'd go into a room, I'd use about a third of my mana, blow up the entire room, and go on to the next space. But here's what's most important. That spell also damaged hidden walls. So I would just check every single room by using Soul Steel, and I found almost every hidden wall organically. I didn't have to worry about that. I just walk into any room, say, is there one here? Use Soul Steel. If yes, it'll be revealed, and if not, it won't be revealed. So that took a lot of the mystery and game sense intuition away from me because I couldn't, like, say, that wall seems intentionally in place. Let me go run up and smack it and see if it'll break. Oh, it did. Cool. I'm rewarded. I didn't have that anymore because Soul Steel just did it for me. Finally.
Billy,
Yeah, go ahead if you want to interject real quick.
No, I have a larger question, so if you're going to make a final point.
Yeah, so I saw jumps of difficulty in this game. One jump in difficulty was when the game became a lot more vertical as opposed to horizontal, which is about halfway through the first regular castle. That was a jump in difficulty. I just adjusted my playstyle a little bit. Everything was cool. The next jump in difficulty came from the very first time you step into the inverted castle. So I had spec'd and built my Alucard to rely on these magic spells. And the enemies that you first see in the first time you go through the inverted castle, you're kind of like way under leveled. Like I think I got through the game not leveled up enough. So I was scaled down really, really poorly when I first went into the inverted castle. So my strategy had to change. All my weapons did 1 damage to everything, and most of my spells did 1 damage to everything. However, if I killed one thing, I leveled up like once or twice from just killing it like a single time. So I'd spend a few minutes walking back and forth in a room just leveling up, and then once I became kind of equal level again, boom, the entire inverted castle was just trivialized by my game break. So what I was left with was only the narrative. I didn't have any of the exploration because I had a guaranteed tool for that, and all the combat became trivial again. So a lot of this game's fun factor I just didn't really get to experience. And I bet there's other people out there that kind of had a similar experience as me. So as much as I think this is a perfect example of a Metroidvania game, it left itself open to being unintentionally spoiled for its player. I'm kind of done with that rant.
Yeah, Billy, let me ask you a question then. Are you blaming the game for this? Because wouldn't the obvious solution just be don't do that thing you were doing? Like, if the way you were playing the game was actively making it non-fun, why didn't you just play the game differently?
I did for lots of parts.
Right.
And because I had save states, I could do that. Like, there were times where I would use save states basically in every save room, like it was a proper saving spot. And then you can kind of tell when there was a boss coming up, so I'd like save state before the boss, or I'd save state right as I found the boss room to be at the beginning of the fight, and I'd just try a bunch of different loadouts of weapons to have fun. But when I said, all right, I'm kind of done with this, I'm just going to win now, I would always go back to my same strategy. So there were times where I could explore the boss fights and learn how the bosses worked by doing what you suggested, Pete, and I did that because there were some bosses where I walked in and I used, I think it's called Tetra Magic, and the boss just died in one spell, and I was like, well, that wasn't very interesting. I didn't even see one of that boss's moves. So I'd reload my save and go like fight it and just see what it even did.
It's just from a larger perspective, it seems like a rather spurious criticism to blame the game for being breakable. Like, because you don't have to break it. There's never any reason to break the game beyond like, oh, I want to break it. At which point, breakable then becomes a strength.
Yeah, that's kind of the argument I was making earlier, that there are so many different ways to get through this game, and it's kind of a testament to this game's design that there are many paths to breakability in this game, and you can find your own path there. But you can also make your way through this game just playing it like a regular Castlevania with none of this hidden depth or none of this, breakability. And it's possible to have both of those runs kind of evolve as you play this game. The first time you play it, you might play it as a straight-up Castlevania. And if it's fair to say this game is almost 20 years old now. It's more than 20 years old. I'm dying. Okay. This game's more than 20 years old. We have been playing now for an entire 2 generations or 3 generations. For 2 decades, we've been playing games that have learned from this game because it is one of the apexes of its design. So we are coming to this game with all of this additional knowledge and baggage that helps us break it in a way that someone who was approaching it for the first time just could not have had. And someone who is approaching it from the first time, who doesn't have this wealth of gaming experience, they might not have it. And so I feel like you said, it's a little bit spurious to blame the game for us being kind of specialists in this genre and having a deeper understanding and appreciation for how this tends to work.
I'm going to push back because I think this is partly the game's fault. And I want to add some reasons why with some other examples. So the first example that comes to mind is Metroid Prime, which is a game that comes out later than this. Metroid Prime comes out in, I think, 2001. This game came out in 97, so not that far apart, just a few years later, albeit the GameCube brought...
generation later.
What? Yeah, it was a console generation later, so this is PlayStation 1 versus a GameCube game. Yeah. But I think my point will stand regardless of the console generation. It's more of a enemy weakness and resistance mechanic. So in Metroid Prime, which is the Metroid game that I played the most, I probably play that game once a year. It's like a part of my rotation. I play that game very regularly. There are enemies that are straight up immune to some of your attacks, and that forces you to use something different. Yeah, if you get access to like the Phazon beam in Metroid Prime, most enemies are going to get blown up, but you don't get that. You have to go through so many iterations of getting new abilities and getting new powers that force you to change how you approach rooms and force you to change how to approach enemies. And in Castlevania Symphony of the Night, if you discover magic, that can work for every enemy in the game. There's no enemy that can't be beaten by magic. And there's no enemy that can't be cheesed out by magic. And when you're going to design stuff like Soul Steel and Tetra Magic, you need to say, is this too good? First question, can it beat every enemy in the game for free? the answer was yes, they should have seen that. They should have just made some enemies to say, hey, look, we can't be hurt by magic. You have to fight us with swords or spells or items. They could have made any amount of enemies to say, hey, check the box, they're immune to spells. I would have been fine with that. But this literally kills everything in the game.
I would prefer I would say, and I think you have a good point, but I would say I would prefer that choice of whether or not I want to cheese the boss, rather than, I'm thinking of a pretty recent, game for me. But have any of you guys played Hollow Knight?
Yeah.
Another Metroidvania. Okay, yep. So you have. Mm-hmm. You know how just mind-bendingly difficult some of it is, and yeah. So, and it's also, that's another Metroidvania, and I have not finished it because I basically given up because I don't want, to spend another, 2 hours, beating my head against a boss, a la Dark Souls, trying to figure out its attack pattern until I can finally get lucky enough to move on. And I think I think that takes away from the overall experience, because I think, with the Metroidvania, like Castlevania, that its key ingredient is the exploration and discovery and all and all that. And when you're met with difficulty spikes like something like Hollow Knight, I think it just takes away from the overall experience. So I like the option that's in Castlevania, like, okay, I've hit a tough spot. Like, I'd rather just move on. I want to see what else, what comes next. Let me just throw this other, throw on Crusaegrim and just blow through this guy, and just sort of move on. I like that option. Yeah, I think it's sort of. It's more of like it kind of respects my time a little bit.
It does.
Like, you can just having that in your back pocket.
I want to ask a question of Gino real quick.
Sure.
So, Gino has a lot more experience in this game genre than I do. But let's talk Final Fantasy for a second.
Yep.
You pick any Final Fantasy game, I think, from like probably 6 to 10, maybe. That's probably where I have the most experience. And for any boss fight, there's probably a way to make it trivial. There's probably some kind of like item you can use or spell you can use, but it's for the most part different for each of those bosses. If you have a mastery of the game, you get rewarded by having a way to fast forward through that fight. So yes. In those games, yes, you have a way to fast forward. It can respect your time if you know that, oh, I just used tent on this enemy and they're blinded and can't hit me, so I'm safe from this boss's attacks for X number of rounds. Again, reiterating, I just wish that this wasn't the silver bullet for every single thing in the game.
Yeah, and I think that's two different approaches to design. This game kind of has one way of defeating any given enemy, right? You get its HP to 0. Mm-hmm. It's one system, and you can approach that a number of different ways. You can do it with combat damage. You can do it by attacking. You can do it with spells. You can do it with item combinations. You can do it with usable items. Like, there's a bunch of different ways to get the outcome that you want. And some of them are easier to exploit than others. But you have all these options, and to some degree you can get around difficulty by using options that are particularly robust. There's also systems that are kind of multifaceted. You've got status effects. You've got buffs and debuffs. You've got those additional things that kind of add texture to the encounters. And when you've got a system that is focused on a single element, I like the idea of having an option that, like Grandin said, kind of respects your time. It allows you to get around difficulty spikes. If you do not want to interact with some of the specifics of individual fights and you want to explore more, or if you want to see some of the amazing dialogue, you can get through it. And I like the idea of a game that, when you have mastery of it, allows you to kind of hone your own experience and choose how you want to play it, rather than one that sits you down and says, hey, boy, this is how you're going to enjoy this fucking game. If you try it any differently, you're going to have a bad time. And I feel like this is kind of the Fury versus, almost Symphony of the Night. There's some games that you have to It's Simon Says. I'm going to do this. You're going to have to do this. And if you don't, you're going to lose. Keep doing it until you get better. Symphony of the Night, you can make playthroughs. You can design your own playthrough. You can come up with a way to approach this game. And it makes this game so much more replayable, I think, because it's not one game that you master. It's a system with a lot of potential approaches that allow you to customize it as you want. So I think it's similar to like Final Fantasy VIII, which is similarly broken. There are a lot of very interesting runs that people do in that game because the system is so flexible and also so broken. But if you're just playing a game that has a very straightforward best style or very straightforward approaches to individual bosses, it can kind of hamstring the creativity of the community to apply their own kind of learnings. Like if Dark Souls was actually difficult enough that you couldn't get through it naked with your bare hands, it would be much less interesting than the kind of broken weirdness that it is, because you can do all sorts of runs that are still valid approaches. But, you know, obviously there's an easier approach, but every approach is valid. And I think that that's a testament to the more robust designs, is that all approaches should be valid. Some will be much easier than others, some will be more difficult, but it allows the player and the community to kind of suss out which ones are the most interesting and the most fun for them.
And I think all of the bosses, except really for one, is definitely beatable by really any level of player, if without using these game breaking, cheats basically. With the one exception really being Galamoth, the last boss, who actually the creator, what was his name? Igarashi came out in an interview saying that Galamoth was meant to not be beaten except by using sort of game breaking, Valkar, the shield combo or Crusagram or something like that. So I think that also, sort of opens the game up to, you can really roll through these bosses sort of any way you want.
Yeah, Galamoth that's the one with the staff and he shoots
the
lightning.
Yeah.
Yeah, that dude, when I played him the first time and I had not discovered any of the game-breaking things, I thought that the game was broken when I got to him because he's so much more difficult than everything else leading up to him. And, it's because there was a layer of the game that I didn't understand. I didn't get Crusagram. I didn't know the shield combo. And all of a sudden, I was, throwing every item. I was using, thunder resistance items, and I was throwing every item I had in my inventory at him. I think I eventually killed him by using my entire inventory.
Yeah. There's an item that doesn't even do anything cool, but just kind of makes you immune to him. It just says that I forget the name of the item, but it says whenever you take lightning damage, you heal instead of taking damage. So you can just stand in a spot of the room, and he only does the lightning attack, and he just is only healing you. Yeah. He never does damage to you.
I think that that's really interesting. Having this gigantic space to play around in, I think, is a lot more interesting as a design than having a very strict kind of design that forces the player to do some certain things. Now, it'll appeal to different people. It's a very different design philosophy, but that's the one that I personally, it appeals to me more.
So I'm going to back off a little bit, saying that this was a major mistake of the game. I'll say probably magic was too strong.
Which is fair. There are elements of this game that are definitely too strong.
I think your argument is convincing to me, Gino, when you draw the analogy to a Dark Souls game. When I think of Dark Souls 1, I'm thinking people are on forums and Reddit and other places where you can talk about the game and say, hey guys, what are fun runs to do of Dark Souls? Because we know how to beat the game, but it's what are fun loadouts to use. And when all of those are valid, and here a game in 1997 has multiple valid runs, now I'm starting to get a little bit more on board. If I think of Symphony of the Night as a game that is supposed to be replayed under different weird conditions, and I'm sure Pete can tell us about weird conditions to play Symphony of the Night on, as I think he did one that was particularly interesting. Then I'm a little more sold on certain item combinations being broken intentionally as a fun way to play through the game in play through the game differently, and that's what gives the game its replayability. I'm a little more on board now, but I think maybe this one needed to be toned down, and maybe I abused it and I spoiled some of my own fun.
Yeah, and that's, I think, appropriate, because this game, like, most people didn't even know that there was a back half of it the first time they played it. Mm-hmm. Like, there's a lot of discovery to be had here. Pete, did you do a gimmick run?
Yeah, so the only one I really wanted to bring up, so there is, in Castlevania, there's a distinct mode you can do. If you input, I'm going to recite what it is. If, like, when you can enter your name, if you enter the name as X bullet point, X exclamation point, V quotation mark Q, it's in all caps, you can play in thief mode or luck mode. So basically what it does is it tanks all of your other stats, but brings luck up to 99 to start the game. So basically what happens is it starts off super hard, but because your luck's so jacked, everybody's just dropping items left and right. And I really think, especially for a game like this, like we talked about for Dead Cells, where the game gets way better when you get to start with different items, I really think for a Metroidvania game or a roguelike game, it's more fun the more items you have. So I would highly recommend, in any case, always playing on Thief mode. I think that's the one true way to play.
That's awesome. I didn't even know about that. There's so much in this game.
Now, I'll add one more thing about stat manipulation. You can.
I like how you breathed heavy before you said that.
Yeah, I'm just like,
numbers.
Hey, kids, you want to talk about stat manipulation? All right,
These
so
charts. Drop charts.
I'm gonna need Gino's help here because he's gonna probably be able to describe this better than I can. But Gino, what do you call it when you can make a stat in a game go to like -1, so it like gets confused and it goes to like max? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
How does that work from like a coding standpoint? 'Cause I don't fucking know.
So it's because basically you roll over the number. Like the maximum number would be like 111111111, you know, whatever the number of bits is.
255.
And then if you go over, it goes back to 0000000. Like that's how the numbers will overflow. And so it's kind of a buffer overflow, but it in your case, if you're going negative, it's an underflow. So you're going from 0 to 255.
Yeah. So you can do that in this game, and the way you do that in this game is with the sword familiar. There's a cool thing you can do with the sword familiar. It's a well-known glitch, so anyone who's like a Castlevania speedrunner knows about this, but you can use the sword familiar, and it has this weird property. If you use the sword familiar's like special magic ability, it allows you to pause the game where you otherwise should not be able to pause the game. This is most useful if you go to the librarian merchant, because the way you talk to him is just by walking into his AoE. You don't push a button to talk to him. You just like walk up to him and his menu shows up. But if you use I don't know the exact combo, but I'm going to describe it well enough that you'll get what I mean. If you somehow combine using the sword familiar's special move and then walk up to the merchant, you'll be able to be in the merchant's store menu, but then you can also push start and go into your own equip menu. So what you do is you get an item. Let's say you have a diamond in your inventory, and you go like you're going to go sell that diamond. And what you do is, instead of selling the diamond to the merchant, if you have one diamond in your inventory, you go ahead and you just equip that diamond onto Alucard's finger, which means that you now have 0 diamonds in your inventory. But because the merchant still thinks you have 1 diamond, you can sell it. And if you sell that diamond to the merchant, you go from 0 diamonds in your inventory to -1 diamonds in your inventory. And when you have -1 diamonds, it thinks you have 255 diamonds in your inventory. So you get infinite money.
Nice.
Yep. You can just repeat that over and over again, get infinite money, and I bought everything the merchant have. Oh, yeah. Bought the diamond mail or whatever it's called, bought Joseph's cloak, bought all the good shit. Bought them out. What?
Nice.
The duplicator?
I did. I got the duplicator, but I never used it because I think I just needed it to get 200.6% or something. I forgot if you need it or not, but I got everything that he had to sell just because I wanted to never have to talk to him again, basically.
I'll give you all my money to not speak to you.
Yeah, basically. It was just, that was the game really respecting my time. Me not having to walk all the way back there again.
Welcome.
I miss that welcome, Alucard.
All right, so I think we've covered our bases with Castlevania Symphony of the Night. What a great game. Tell me, what were Lisa's last words? Well, Father, she said, do not hate humans. If you cannot live with them, then at least do them no harm. For theirs is already a hard lot.
Theirs is a hard lot, yeah. It's true.
She also said to tell you. She also said to tell you that she will love you for all of eternity. Dracula, Lisa, forgive me. Farewell, my son. And with that, we say goodbye to Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Last thoughts, anyone?
I have one more quick point. This won't take very long. So I think of I want to bring Castlevania Symphony of the Night up against two other games. Do a quick comparison. So I want to look at Castlevania Symphony of the Night. I want to look at Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, and I want to look at Super Mario 64. And when I think about Symphony of the Night, I think of this as being like a turning point in the Metroidvania genre. They did so many things well, from a world-building mechanic, from an item option mechanic, from, there's a lot of things that just went perfect for this game. All of the Metroidvania genre from here on out looks back at Symphony of the Night as reference material. Also, that's true for all the Mario games and games like it, for Super Mario 64, and all of the Legend of Zelda series, probably excluding Breath of the Wild a little bit because it takes a very different turn like from its design, but think of Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, all the good stuff. While I think that Castlevania deserves all of its praise because of how much it's done to the industry, I think those other games like Mario 64 and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, they actually hold up a little better for me than this game does, or than I think this game would do if I had played it when it was originally coming out. I don't have a fully fleshed out reason why, but I'm thinking of Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time and what they did for their genres and their game series, and what Symphony of the Night did, and they both did monumental things, but I feel like I would go backwards in this series and still have more fun playing Ocarina of Time and Super Mario 64, but knowing that Symphony of the Night gave rise to what is now much, much better Metroidvania games that owe their success to Symphony of the Night. But if I had to choose between playing Symphony of the Night and one of its soul children that came years and years later, I'd prefer to play the game that mastered even more things after Symphony of the Night. I would still go back and play Mario 64 and Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time just for those games' sake. I mean, Symphony of the Night's still great, but I'd probably play those other two games more.
I mean, it's fair to say that those two you also played as a child and have nostalgia for, whereas this is a game that you literally played once after you've played all those other games.
Well, no, I played other Metroidvania games on release.
I was the opposite, because I have the opposite. Yeah. I had the opposite experience. I didn't play Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time growing up, but I did play Symphony of the Night.
I played other Castlevania games. I just didn't play Symphony of the Night earlier. So maybe I'm missing some of it there, but there are some kids that think Majora's Mask is the best Zelda game, and I'm like, all right, cool, whatever.
And they're right.
They played it more as a kid, so I get it. But I played other Castlevania games around the time they were released, or just a year or two after. But now I see Symphony of the Night was like the granddaddy of this game series. Symphony of the Night is like the flagship iteration. Which is cool, fine, and it deserves it. It's great. It's a fucking fantastic game. I'm just thinking of those other two games, and like Metroid Prime is doing a lot more, and like Metroid Fusion is doing a lot more for me on a go back in time and play this value. I think there's so many good Metroidvania games now because of Symphony of the Night. You should just kind of go play them now.
I disagree, but that's fine. Pete, last thought.
Yeah, no, I typically disagree with Billy, and I think this would continue the tradition. This is a great game. I think it's a solid one worth playing. And if you want to see sort of a historically important game for a particular genre, this is a good one to pick.
Great. Grandin, final thoughts.
I just would like to say that if Dracula doesn't win the Trenchy this year for best voice acting, you are all going to receive a very sternly worded email.
What is a man?
That's a great question. Well, thank you, and I hope you enjoyed your time on Deep Listens. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been awesome.
Welcome inside of the sausage as it's being made.
Ew. Ew. I feel like I'm the dude who just clips it at the end as it's coming out of the machine because I'm like the editor, so I'm the dude who puts like the little like waxy, snappy seal on the out of it, and I've got all these greasy marks on my clothes from where I wipe my hands. Ugh.
I regret
you're
using
like
that.
You're like the
now.
chef in oh god, you're like one of those twin chefs in Little Nightmares.
Oh yeah, that's what I feel like. Now that you make this analogy,
you have a face under your face.
Yes. Ew. Gross.
And that's the one you picked to wear.
All right. So thank you, Billy.
Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Who's next?
Yeah,
up?
who picks?
Sorry, am I
next?
jumping the gun? Is it me?
Yeah, you're next up.
I am.
You're next up, Pete. Yeah, because this was a Metroidvania game which took Billy's spot. We just assumed that it was going to be a Metroidvania. We went to the umpires. They decreed it. It was fair game.
Okay, I'll give you guys options then. Okay.
Yes.
We could play. These are all games that came out this year. I figured we should do something contemporary. We can play another Metroidvania. We could play sort of a platformer puzzly sort of game, or we can play an RPG with a twist.
I think I want to let our biggest fan listener decide what podcast he wants to listen to next.
All right,
That's
Grandin,
fair.
what do you want?
Grandin, your pick.
Did you hear the options?
So it was. Can I hear the options, or do I
Yes.
have to just go based off the?
No, you have to go based on the descriptions, but I can repeat them again if you need them.
Okay, so not what's not the Metroidvania ones?
RPG with a twist or puzzly sort of platformer thing.
I would say RPG with a twist.
Yeah.
All right, sounds good. Then for our next podcast, we are going to play Minute. It's spelled MINIT. If anybody wants to look it up, it's basically an RPG, but it unfolds 60 seconds at a time.
Oh, it's like Half Minute Hero.
Yeah, pretty much.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right,
It was
cool.
released in April of this year.
I like that you are denying what game did we just play? That
Symphony
was going
of
to
the
be
Night.
our game of the year by default. Because it was the only game we had played that came out this year.
It was the
Flipping Death.
yeah Flipping Death. Yeah.
Flipping Death
which very well might still win, but I don't want it to win unopposed.
That's fair. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you, listeners. Remember, if you want to get in touch with the show, do so at deeplistenspod, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We've got comment sections, and deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, peace.